Question 1. The assessment process reveals an applicant for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance examination who demonstrates significant enthusiasm and a compelling personal narrative, yet whose academic transcripts and standardized test scores do not fully meet the minimum thresholds explicitly stated in the Institute's official admission regulations. The admissions committee is divided on how to proceed. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam? Option A. Prioritize the applicant's perceived passion and unique background over the documented evidence of meeting the admission criteria, as these qualities might indicate future success. Option B. Create new, unwritten criteria on the spot to accommodate the applicant's perceived potential, ensuring they are admitted despite not meeting the published requirements. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the explicit academic and non-academic requirements outlined in the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance examination guidelines, making a decision based solely on documented adherence to these criteria. Option D. Rely solely on the subjective opinion of the committee member who feels a strong personal connection to the applicant's story and advocates for their admission. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the explicit academic and non-academic requirements outlined in the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance examination guidelines, making a decision based solely on documented adherence to these criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the applicant's perceived potential and the established admission criteria of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology. The admissions committee must balance the desire to identify promising candidates who might not fit traditional molds with the imperative to uphold the integrity and fairness of the selection process as defined by the Institute's regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are not based on subjective impressions alone, but are grounded in the established guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the explicit academic and non-academic requirement outlined in the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance examination guidelines. This approach is correct because it adheres strictly to the established regulatory framework for admissions. The guidelines serve as the definitive source of criteria, ensuring a standardized and equitable evaluation for all applicants. By focusing on documented evidence and adherence to these published standards, the committee upholds the principles of fairness and transparency mandated by the Institute's governing regulations. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize the applicant's perceived passion or unique background over the documented evidence of meeting the admission criteria. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses the established, objective standards set forth by the Institute. Such a decision would be arbitrary and could lead to accusations of favoritism or a lack of due process, undermining the credibility of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the subjective opinion of a single committee member who feels a strong personal connection to the applicant's story. This is an ethical and regulatory failure, as it introduces bias and deviates from the collective, objective assessment mandated by the Institute's guidelines. Admissions decisions must be based on a consensus derived from the established criteria, not individual sentiment. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to create new, unwritten criteria on the spot to accommodate the applicant. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it demonstrates a disregard for the established admission framework. Such an action would render the published guidelines meaningless and create an unfair advantage for this applicant, potentially leading to legal challenges and a loss of trust in the Institute's admissions process. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Clearly identifying the applicant's profile against each specific requirement in the official admission guidelines. 2. Documenting the assessment of each criterion, noting any discrepancies or areas where the applicant falls short. 3. If there is a perceived exceptional circumstance that might warrant consideration outside the standard criteria, this must be explicitly addressed within the existing framework or through a formal, documented process for exceptional cases, ensuring transparency and fairness. 4. Seeking consensus among the admissions committee based on the documented evidence and the established guidelines. Question 2. When evaluating the conduct of a fellow applicant during the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination, you observe them discreetly using unauthorized notes. What is the most appropriate and ethically sound course of action to uphold the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Make a note of the incident for personal reflection, but take no further action. Option B. Ignore the incident to avoid potential conflict or repercussions. Option C. Immediately report the observed incident to the invigilator or examination supervisor. Option D. Discreetly inform the applicant that their actions are being observed. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the observed incident to the invigilator or examination supervisor. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the core principles and ethical considerations relevant to academic integrity within the context of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance examination process. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate course of action when faced with potential academic misconduct, balancing the need for fairness to all applicants with the integrity of the examination. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response aligns with the Institute's stated values and examination regulations. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent reporting of the observed misconduct to the designated examination authority. This upholds the principle of academic integrity, which is paramount in any educational institution, especially during admissions. By reporting, the applicant acts ethically and responsibly, ensuring that the examination process remains fair and unbiased for all candidates. This aligns with the implicit regulatory framework of any reputable academic institution that mandates honesty and integrity in its admissions procedures. The AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology, like any such institution, would expect its prospective students to adhere to these standards. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed misconduct. This failure to report constitutes a passive acceptance of academic dishonesty, undermining the fairness of the examination and potentially allowing an unqualified candidate to gain admission. Ethically, this is a dereliction of duty to uphold academic standards. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the applicant directly. While seemingly proactive, this could lead to an escalation of conflict, potentially compromising the examination environment and the integrity of the evidence. It bypasses the established procedures for handling such matters, which are designed to ensure a fair and impartial investigation. Furthermore, it places the applicant in a position of authority they are not authorized to exercise. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a clear understanding of institutional policies on academic integrity and misconduct. When observing potential violations, the first step is always to identify the appropriate reporting channel as defined by the institution. The focus should be on gathering objective observations without personal judgment or intervention. The subsequent action should be to report these observations through the designated channels, allowing the relevant authorities to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation. This process ensures that decisions are made based on established procedures and evidence, maintaining the credibility of the examination and the institution. Question 3. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy between the academic transcript submitted by a prospective student for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam and the official records held by their previous educational institution. The discrepancy involves a significant difference in the reported GPA. What is the most appropriate course of action for the AKPRIND Admissions Committee? Option A. Contact the prospective student to request an explanation for the discrepancy and seek official verification of their academic records. Option B. Proceed with the admission based on the submitted transcript, assuming it is accurate. Option C. Immediately reject the prospective student's application due to the inconsistency. Option D. Adjust the prospective student's submitted transcript to align with the official records without informing the student. The correct answer is A. Contact the prospective student to request an explanation for the discrepancy and seek official verification of their academic records. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape surrounding academic integrity and the admission process at AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology. The core conflict lies between the desire to admit promising students and the imperative to uphold the integrity of the admissions process by ensuring all submitted information is truthful and verifiable. The applicant must demonstrate an understanding of the principles of honesty, fairness, and compliance with institutional guidelines, which are paramount in any educational institution's entrance examination framework. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the applicant regarding the discrepancy found in their academic records. This approach upholds the principle of fairness by giving the applicant an opportunity to explain or rectify the situation. It also aligns with the regulatory framework of AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology, which implicitly requires all submitted documentation to be accurate and verifiable for a valid admission. By seeking clarification, the admissions committee demonstrates due diligence and adherence to established procedures, ensuring that admission decisions are based on legitimate qualifications. This proactive and transparent method prevents potential future complications arising from falsified documents and maintains the credibility of the institute. An incorrect approach would be to overlook the discrepancy and proceed with the admission based on the assumption that the submitted documents are accurate. This failure to verify information directly contravenes the implicit requirement for truthful submissions in any entrance examination process, compromises the integrity of the admissions process, and could lead to admitting a student who does not meet the genuine academic prerequisites, potentially impacting the academic standards of the institution. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the applicant without seeking any clarification. While upholding accuracy is important, an immediate rejection without due process can be seen as unfair, especially if the discrepancy is a genuine administrative error or a misunderstanding on the applicant's part. This approach fails to provide the applicant with a reasonable opportunity to address the issue, which is a fundamental aspect of fair evaluation. A third incorrect approach would be to alter the applicant's records to match the submitted information without their knowledge or consent. This is a severe ethical and regulatory violation. It constitutes falsification of records, undermines the integrity of the admissions process, and is a breach of trust. Such an action would have severe repercussions for the individuals involved and the institution's reputation. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic review of all submitted documents, identification of any inconsistencies, and a clear, documented process for addressing these discrepancies. This typically includes seeking clarification from the applicant, verifying information through official channels, and making a decision based on established institutional policies and ethical guidelines. Transparency and fairness are key pillars in maintaining the integrity of the academic admission process. Question 4. Analysis of a situation where an instructor suspects a student's entrance exam essay for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology may contain plagiarized content based on similarities with publicly available online materials. The instructor is unsure whether to report this suspicion directly for immediate disciplinary action or to first engage in a more informal discussion with the student to understand their writing process and potential sources. Option A. Initiate a formal investigation process as outlined in the AKPRIND Academic Integrity Policy, ensuring the student is formally notified of the allegations and given an opportunity to respond to the evidence. Option B. Discuss the suspected plagiarism with the student informally, seeking an explanation without formally documenting the interaction or initiating a formal process. Option C. Ignore the suspicion as it is an entrance exam, and the stakes are lower than for enrolled students, focusing on academic integrity for enrolled students only. Option D. Immediately fail the student's entrance exam based on the suspicion of plagiarism and inform the student of the decision. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal investigation process as outlined in the AKPRIND Academic Integrity Policy, ensuring the student is formally notified of the allegations and given an opportunity to respond to the evidence. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic integrity, requiring careful judgment to balance the institution's commitment to academic honesty with the need to support students. The AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam regulations, as per its internal guidelines and the Indonesian higher education framework, emphasize the importance of original work and the prohibition of plagiarism. The challenge lies in identifying genuine academic misconduct versus instances where a student might have struggled with understanding or properly citing sources due to various factors, including language barriers or insufficient academic writing training. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based investigation that adheres strictly to AKPRIND established academic integrity policy. This policy, aligned with national regulations on higher education, mandates a fair process for addressing allegations of academic dishonesty. This process typically includes providing the student with an opportunity to respond to the allegations, reviewing all submitted materials, and consulting with relevant academic committees or disciplinary boards. The justification for this approach is rooted in principles of due process, fairness, and the need for objective evidence to support any disciplinary action. It ensures that decisions are not arbitrary, but are based on a clear violation of established rules, thereby upholding the credibility of the academic program and the institution. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume guilt and impose a penalty without a proper investigation. This fails to uphold the principle of innocent until proven guilty, which is a cornerstone of fair disciplinary procedures in academic settings. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the concern without any review, which would undermine the institution's commitment to academic integrity and could allow genuine misconduct to go unaddressed. Third incorrect approach is to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or the subjective judgment of an individual without a structured process for gathering and evaluating proof. This lacks the objectivity and rigor required by academic regulations and ethical standards, potentially leading to unfair outcomes and damaging the institution's reputation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures. This involves 1. Gathering all relevant information and evidence objectively. 2. Consulting the institution's academic integrity policy and any applicable national regulations. 3. Ensuring a fair and transparent process for the accused student, including the right to respond. 4. Making a decision based on the evidence and policy, with clear documentation of the findings and rationale. 5. Following established appeal procedures if applicable. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are defensible, ethical, and in line with the institution's commitment to academic excellence and fairness. Question 5. Market research demonstrates that a significant number of applicants for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam have previously completed relevant coursework at another institution. One such applicant, preparing for the exam, finds that some of their previous assignments and research papers contain detailed analyses and well-articulated arguments that directly address topics likely to appear in the entrance exam. The applicant is considering how to best utilize this existing material to prepare their responses for the entrance exam. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam? Option A. The applicant should independently generate all responses for the entrance exam, drawing upon their knowledge and understanding, and ensuring that all submitted work is original and not a direct reproduction or close paraphrase of any prior academic materials, even their own. Option B. The applicant can assume that all previously produced academic work is automatically permissible for use in the entrance exam without any need for adaptation or consideration of originality, as it represents their existing knowledge base. Option C. The applicant may directly copy and paste relevant sections from their previous assignments and research papers into their entrance exam responses, as this material was produced by them and demonstrates their prior academic effort. Option D. The applicant should seek assistance from former instructors or peers to adapt their previous academic work to precisely match the entrance exam questions, ensuring that the content is presented as their own. Correct answer is A. The applicant should independently generate all responses for the entrance exam, drawing upon their knowledge and understanding, and ensuring that all submitted work is original and not a direct reproduction or close paraphrase of any prior academic materials, even their own. Explanation. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires an applicant to navigate the ethical considerations and regulatory expectations surrounding the use of information obtained during a previous academic program. The challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate use of prior knowledge and academic misconduct, specifically plagiarism or unauthorized use of proprietary materials. Careful judgment is required to ensure adherence to the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam regulations, which are designed to ensure a fair and equitable assessment of all candidates' abilities. The correct approach involves independently generating original responses based on the applicant's current understanding and knowledge, without direct reliance on or reproduction of specific materials from their prior academic work. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principle of academic integrity, which mandates that all submitted work must be the applicant's own. The AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam guidelines implicitly require originality and prohibit the submission of work that is not independently created. Using prior work without proper attribution or adaptation would violate these implicit expectations and could be construed as academic dishonesty. An incorrect approach that involves directly copying or closely paraphrasing sections from previous academic assignments, even if the content is relevant, represents a failure to produce original work. This violates the core principle of academic integrity and the expectation that entrance exam responses should reflect the applicant's current, independent capabilities. Another incorrect approach, which is to claim that all prior academic work is automatically permissible for use in the entrance exam without considering the context or potential for plagiarism, demonstrates a misunderstanding of academic honesty standards. This approach fails to recognize that even one's own previous work can constitute plagiarism if presented as new, original work without appropriate acknowledgement, or if it was produced under conditions that prohibit its reuse in this manner. A third incorrect approach, which is to seek external assistance to adapt previous work to fit the exam questions, also constitutes academic misconduct. This bypasses the intended assessment of the applicant's individual knowledge and skills, undermining the fairness of the examination process. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the explicit and implicit rules governing the assessment. This involves a commitment to academic honesty and a clear understanding of what constitutes original work. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and generate new material that is demonstrably the applicant's own, rather than risking an accusation of academic misconduct. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency, integrity, and adherence to the stated or implied requirements of the examination. Question 6. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential applicant for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's engineering program has submitted academic transcripts that appear to have minor inconsistencies in the grading scale notation compared to the standard format expected by the institute. The applicant, however, has a strong portfolio of personal projects demonstrating advanced technical skills. The admissions committee is deliberating on how to proceed with this application. Option A. Immediately reject the application due to the presence of any inconsistencies in the submitted academic documentation, regardless of the applicant's other qualifications. Option B. Request the applicant to provide an official letter from their previous institution clarifying the grading scale notation and verify the authenticity of the submitted transcripts through direct contact with the institution. Option C. Accept the application as is, given the applicant's impressive portfolio of personal projects, assuming the inconsistencies are minor and do not fundamentally alter the applicant's academic standing. Option D. Forward the application to a senior faculty member for an informal review and a personal recommendation on whether to proceed, bypassing formal verification procedures. The correct answer is B. Request the applicant to provide an official letter from their previous institution clarifying the grading scale notation and verify the authenticity of the submitted transcripts through direct contact with the institution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the applicant's perceived potential and the established academic integrity standards of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology. The admissions committee must balance the desire to identify promising candidates with the imperative to uphold the credibility and fairness of the entrance examination process. A rigorous and objective assessment is paramount to ensure that all applicants are evaluated on a level playing field, adhering strictly to the AKPRIND established admission criteria and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the AKPRIND official admission regulations, specifically focusing on the authenticity and completeness of academic records and any supplementary materials. This approach is justified by the AKPRIND commitment to academic integrity and fair selection, as outlined in its entrance examination guidelines. These guidelines mandate that all admissions decisions be based on verifiable qualifications and adherence to stated application procedures. Any deviation from these established protocols, even for a candidate with exceptional perceived potential, would undermine the fairness of the process and could set a precedent for future irregularities. An incorrect approach would be to overlook the discrepancies in the applicant's academic records due to their perceived potential. This failure would violate the AKPRIND admission regulations by not ensuring the accuracy and validity of submitted credentials, thereby compromising the integrity of the selection process. Another incorrect approach would be to grant special consideration or an exception to the standard documentation requirements without explicit authorization from the AKPRIND governing academic board or a clearly defined policy for such exceptions. This would contravene the principle of equal treatment for all applicants and could lead to accusations of favoritism or bias, damaging the institution's reputation. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulations and ethical principles. This involves 1. Clearly understanding the specific rules and guidelines governing the admission process. 2. Objectively evaluating all applications based on these criteria. 3. Identifying any discrepancies or potential issues that require further investigation or clarification. And 4. Seeking guidance or approval from appropriate authorities within the institution when faced with ambiguous situations or requests for exceptions, always ensuring that any decision is well documented and justifiable according to institutional policy. Question 7. Research into the effectiveness of a novel renewable energy storage system developed by a research team at AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology has yielded preliminary data. The initial hypothesis predicted a significant improvement in energy retention efficiency. However, the preliminary results show only a marginal improvement, with some data points even suggesting a slight decrease in efficiency under specific operating conditions. The research team is preparing a report for the Institute's internal review, which is a crucial step before wider dissemination and potential patent applications. Which of the following approaches best reflects the ethical and professional conduct expected of researchers within the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's regulatory framework for academic research? Option A. Present all preliminary data accurately, including the marginal improvements and the instances of decreased efficiency, clearly stating that the results are preliminary and require further investigation to understand the observed variations and their implications. Option B. Focus solely on the data points that show a slight decrease in efficiency, suggesting the system is fundamentally flawed, and disregard the data indicating marginal improvements. Option C. Conclude that the system is not effective based on the mixed preliminary results and recommend abandoning further development, without exploring potential reasons for the decreased efficiency. Option D. Emphasize the marginal improvements observed, framing them as a promising first step, and downplay or omit the data points indicating decreased efficiency, attributing them to minor experimental anomalies. The correct answer is D. Emphasize the marginal improvements observed, framing them as a promising first step, and downplay or omit the data points indicating decreased efficiency, attributing them to minor experimental anomalies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable research outcomes. The AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam, like many academic institutions, places a high value on original research and ethical conduct. The challenge lies in navigating the ethical boundaries of data interpretation and presentation when faced with preliminary results that might not align with initial hypotheses or institutional expectations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of research excellence does not compromise the integrity of the findings or the ethical standards expected of future scientists and technologists. The correct approach involves transparently reporting the preliminary findings, even if they are not as conclusive or supportive of the initial hypothesis as anticipated. This upholds the principle of scientific honesty, which is a cornerstone of academic and professional conduct. By acknowledging the limitations and preliminary nature of the data, the researcher demonstrates intellectual rigor and a commitment to accurate reporting. This aligns with the ethical guidelines of academic research, which prioritize truthfulness and the avoidance of misleading interpretations. An incorrect approach that involves selectively highlighting only the data that supports the hypothesis, while downplaying or omitting contradictory findings, constitutes academic dishonesty. This misrepresents the research and can lead to flawed conclusions and future research built on a false premise. Another incorrect approach, which is to prematurely declare definitive conclusions based on incomplete data, violates the scientific method and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the iterative and evidence-based nature of research. This can mislead peers, supervisors, and potentially the public. Finally, an approach that involves fabricating or manipulating data to fit a desired outcome is a severe ethical breach, undermining the entire foundation of scientific inquiry and trust. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a commitment to the core principles of research ethics: honesty, objectivity, and transparency. When faced with ambiguous or unexpected results, a researcher should first consult with their supervisor or a mentor to discuss the findings and potential interpretations. They should then strive to present the data as it is, acknowledging any limitations, and explore alternative explanations for the observed results. The focus should always be on the integrity of the research process and the accurate dissemination of knowledge, rather than on achieving a predetermined outcome. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that the admissions committee at the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology is considering several approaches to evaluate a new applicant's suitability for the upcoming academic year. Which approach best aligns with the institute's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for admissions? Option A. Prioritize the applicant based on a personal recommendation from a senior faculty member who knows the applicant's family. Option B. Expedite the review process by overlooking minor inconsistencies in the applicant's submitted academic transcripts. Option C. Consider the applicant's potential to secure a high-paying job after graduation as a primary factor in the admission decision. Option D. Evaluate the applicant's submitted documents strictly against the published admission criteria and requirements of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the applicant based on a personal recommendation from a senior faculty member who knows the applicant's family. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to understand and apply the specific regulatory framework governing admissions to the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology. The challenge lies in discerning which actions align with the institute's established procedures and ethical standards for candidate evaluation, as opposed to those that might introduce bias or circumvent the intended selection process. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness and adherence to the AKPRIND admission policies. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documents against the established criteria outlined in the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's admission guidelines. This approach is right because it directly addresses the core requirement of the entrance exam, assessing an applicant's suitability based on the institute's defined standards. Adhering to these guidelines ensures a fair and transparent evaluation process, which is a fundamental ethical and regulatory obligation for any educational institution. It upholds the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. An incorrect approach that involves prioritizing an applicant based on a personal acquaintance with a faculty member fails to adhere to the AKPRIND admission regulations. This introduces an element of favoritism and bias, undermining the merit-based selection process. Such an action would be a direct violation of ethical principles of fairness and impartiality in admissions. Another incorrect approach, which is to overlook minor discrepancies in the submitted documents to expedite the process, disregards the established procedural requirements of the AKPRIND admission framework. While efficiency is desirable, it cannot come at the expense of procedural integrity. Failing to follow the prescribed document verification steps can lead to admitting unqualified candidates or creating grounds for future challenges to the admission process, thereby violating regulatory compliance. A further incorrect approach, which is to consider external factors not specified in the AKPRIND admission criteria, such as the applicant's perceived future earning potential, introduces subjective and irrelevant considerations. The AKPRIND admission framework is designed to evaluate academic and other relevant qualifications as defined by the institute, not to speculate on an applicant's future financial success. This approach deviates from the established regulatory framework and introduces an inappropriate basis for selection. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory framework and guidelines of the institution, in this case, AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's admission policies. Second, evaluating the applicant's profile strictly against these defined criteria. Third, identifying any potential conflicts of interest or biases and actively mitigating them. Finally, documenting the entire evaluation process to ensure transparency and accountability, thereby upholding both regulatory compliance and ethical standards. Question 9. Comparative studies suggest that prospective students often seek detailed insights into academic programs and admission processes. In the context of preparing promotional materials for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam, which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specific to this exam? Option A. Focus on the high employability rates of graduates, with a simplified explanation of the entrance exam process that avoids technical jargon. Option B. Highlight the prestigious faculty members and state-of-the-art facilities, with a brief mention that the entrance exam is competitive. Option C. Detail the specific subjects covered in the entrance exam, the scoring methodology, and the eligibility criteria as per the official AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam regulations. Option D. Emphasize the unique research opportunities available within the programs, while providing a general overview of the entrance exam requirements as outlined in the official prospectus. The correct answer is D. Emphasize the unique research opportunities available within the programs, while providing a general overview of the entrance exam requirements as outlined in the official prospectus. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to attract prospective students and the imperative to adhere to the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam regulations. Misrepresenting program details, even with good intentions, can lead to significant ethical and regulatory breaches, potentially invalidating applications and damaging the institute's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure all communications are accurate and compliant. The correct approach involves providing clear, accurate, and verifiable information about the entrance exam process, including eligibility criteria, application procedures, and the scope of the examination, strictly adhering to the official AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam guidelines. This ensures transparency and fairness for all applicants, upholding the integrity of the admission process. This aligns with the ethical principle of honesty and the regulatory requirement for accurate representation of academic programs and admission procedures, as stipulated by the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's governing bodies for its entrance examinations. An incorrect approach that focuses on highlighting only the most appealing aspects of a program, without mentioning potential prerequisites or the rigorous nature of the entrance exam, fails to meet the regulatory requirement for full disclosure. This can mislead prospective students, leading to disappointment and potential challenges to their admission. Another incorrect approach that suggests omitting specific details about the exam format to avoid discouraging applicants violates the principle of transparency and the regulatory expectation that all essential information for a successful application be readily available. Finally, an approach that proposes exaggerating the success rates of past candidates without substantiation is a direct contravention of ethical advertising standards and regulatory guidelines against misleading claims, undermining the credibility of the institute. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulations and ethical principles. This involves thoroughly understanding the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam guidelines, consulting official documentation for any ambiguities, and ensuring all communication materials are reviewed for accuracy and completeness before dissemination. When in doubt, seeking clarification from the relevant admissions or regulatory department is crucial. Question 10. Compliance review shows that the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's Entrance Examination Committee has been tasked with developing new question sets for the upcoming admission cycle. The committee is considering several methods for question generation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for ensuring a fair and credible examination process at the institute? Option A. Utilizing a significant portion of questions from previous year's examination, with minor modifications, to expedite the question development process and ensure familiarity for some candidates. Option B. Developing questions based on a consensus among committee members regarding the most important topics, without strict adherence to the official syllabus, to ensure the exam is challenging. Option C. Allowing external subject matter experts, who are not part of the official committee, to independently generate a substantial number of questions, without direct oversight from the Institute's examination board. Option D. Strictly adhering to the official syllabus and learning objectives, with all questions undergoing a rigorous review process by subject matter experts and the examination board to ensure relevance, clarity, and fairness. The correct answer is B. Developing questions based on a consensus among committee members regarding the most important topics, without strict adherence to the official syllabus, to ensure the exam is challenging. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in ensuring that the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology adheres to its own internal regulations and the broader ethical guidelines expected of an academic institution, particularly concerning the integrity of its entrance examination process. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient admissions with the absolute imperative of maintaining fairness, transparency, and the credibility of the examination. Misinterpreting or misapplying the established examination guidelines can lead to accusations of bias, procedural unfairness, and a potential erosion of trust in the institution's admissions process. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's specific entrance examination regulations. This means meticulously reviewing the documented procedures for question generation, ensuring that all questions align with the syllabus and learning objectives, and that the process is free from any undue influence or bias. The regulatory justification is rooted in the principle of procedural fairness and the Institute's commitment to its own established rules, which are designed to ensure a merit-based selection process. Ethically, this approach upholds the integrity of the examination and treats all prospective students equitably. An incorrect approach would be to deviate from the established question generation protocols based on assumptions or perceived expediency. For instance, relying on past examination papers without a formal review process or incorporating questions that are not directly derived from the approved syllabus would violate the Institute's regulations. This failure to follow documented procedures undermines the validity of the examination and could lead to legal challenges or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to allow external parties, without proper authorization and oversight, to influence the content of the examination questions. This introduces a significant risk of bias and compromises the independence of the admissions process, violating both regulatory requirements for impartiality and ethical standards of academic integrity. Professionals tasked with overseeing entrance examinations should adopt a systematic decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly identifying and understanding all relevant internal regulations and external guidelines governing the examination. 2. Establishing a robust review and approval process for all examination materials, ensuring alignment with syllabus and fairness criteria. 3. Maintaining meticulous documentation of all stages of the examination development and administration. 4. Implementing mechanisms for addressing any deviations or potential conflicts with established procedures promptly and transparently. 5. Prioritizing ethical considerations, such as fairness, impartiality, and academic integrity, above all other factors. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates that during the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination, an invigilator observed a candidate appearing to consult notes concealed within their clothing. According to AKPRIND examination regulations, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the invigilator? Option A. Immediately stop the candidate's examination, inform them of the suspected violation, and report the incident to the examination supervisor for further investigation according to AKPRIND established procedures. Option B. Verbally warn the candidate about potential cheating and allow them to continue the examination, assuming it was a minor lapse in judgment. Option C. Overlook the potential violation to avoid disrupting the examination environment and address it only if the candidate's performance is exceptionally high. Option D. Discreetly confiscate the suspected notes and continue monitoring the candidate's examination without further immediate action. The correct answer is D. Discreetly confiscate the suspected notes and continue monitoring the candidate's examination without further immediate action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to academic integrity and the application of institutional regulations during the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination process. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to uphold the integrity of the examination with the ethical obligation to ensure fairness and due process for all applicants. A candidate's potential violation of examination rules requires a careful and objective assessment, adhering strictly to AKPRIND established guidelines. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of investigation, ensuring that any allegations of rule violations are thoroughly examined in accordance with AKPRIND-specific examination regulations. This includes gathering evidence, providing the candidate an opportunity to respond, and making a decision based solely on the established rules and evidence. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes fairness, transparency, and adherence to the established framework governing the entrance exam, thereby protecting the integrity of the admissions process and the reputation of the institution. An incorrect approach that involves immediate disqualification without investigation fails to provide due process and may lead to an unjust outcome. This violates the principle of fairness and could contravene AKPRIND regulations regarding disciplinary procedures for examination misconduct, which likely stipulate a process for review and appeal. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the observed irregularity due to time constraints, compromises the integrity of the examination and sets a precedent for future misconduct, violating the institution's commitment to a fair and equitable admissions process. Finally, an approach that involves making a subjective judgment without reference to specific rules or evidence is arbitrary and undermines the objective standards expected in an academic admissions process, potentially leading to discriminatory or biased decisions. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes adherence to established procedures, objective evidence gathering, and fair treatment. This involves understanding the specific regulations of AKPRIND concerning examination conduct and disciplinary actions, documenting all observations and actions, and ensuring that any decision is based on a thorough and impartial review of the facts against the established rules. Question 12. Consider a scenario where an applicant for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam has previously taken the same exam in a prior year, but was not admitted. The applicant is now reapplying and is unsure whether they are obligated to disclose this previous attempt on their current application form, as the form does not explicitly ask about prior exam history. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the applicant to take in this situation? Option A. Proactively disclose the previous exam attempt to the AKPRIND Admissions Committee, explaining the circumstances of their prior application. Option B. Omit any mention of the previous exam attempt, assuming that if it is not asked, it does not need to be disclosed. Option C. Seek advice from a friend who is a current student at AKPRIND on how to best navigate the application process without drawing attention to the previous exam. Option D. Attempt to contact an admissions officer informally to inquire about the best way to present their application without explicitly mentioning the prior attempt. The correct answer is A. Proactively disclose the previous exam attempt to the AKPRIND Admissions Committee, explaining the circumstances of their prior application. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the applicant's desire to present their qualifications favorably and the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's commitment to fair and transparent admission processes. The applicant's actions, if not handled appropriately, could undermine the integrity of the entrance examination. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the admission process remains equitable for all candidates. The correct approach involves the applicant directly and truthfully disclosing the information about their previous participation in the AKPRIND entrance exam to the admissions committee. This upholds the principle of academic integrity and honesty, which is a fundamental ethical requirement in educational institutions. By proactively informing the committee, the applicant demonstrates respect for the rules and allows the institute to make an informed decision based on complete information. This aligns with the spirit of fair competition and ensures that all applicants are evaluated on a level playing field, as expected by the AKPRIND admission guidelines. An incorrect approach would be to omit any mention of the previous exam attempt. This constitutes a failure to disclose material information, which can be interpreted as an attempt to mislead the admissions committee. Such an omission violates the ethical obligation of honesty and could lead to the invalidation of the application or admission if discovered later, damaging the applicant's reputation and the institute's credibility. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to bribe or influence an admissions officer to overlook the previous attempt. This is a severe ethical and potentially legal violation, representing a direct attempt to subvert the fair admission process through illicit means. It undermines the merit-based system and is strictly prohibited by the AKPRIND policies and general ethical standards for academic institutions. A third incorrect approach would be to seek advice from a current student or alumni on how to game the system or find loopholes to avoid disclosing the previous attempt. While seeking advice is generally acceptable, seeking advice on how to circumvent established admission procedures or engage in deceptive practices is ethically unsound. It encourages a mindset that prioritizes circumventing rules over honest participation, which is detrimental to the academic environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve prioritizing honesty and transparency. Applicants should always strive to provide complete and accurate information to educational institutions. When in doubt about disclosure requirements, it is best to err on the side of transparency and proactively communicate with the admissions office. Professionals in admissions should also be vigilant in identifying potential discrepancies and uphold the integrity of the process by adhering strictly to established guidelines and ethical principles. Question 13. Operational review demonstrates a pattern of minor administrative errors in the processing of applicant documents for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam, such as slightly incomplete forms or missing supplementary materials that do not fundamentally alter an applicant's eligibility. Which of the following represents the most appropriate regulatory compliance approach? Option A. Implement a standardized procedure for requesting missing documentation from affected applicants within a defined timeframe, ensuring all such requests are logged and tracked against the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam guidelines. Option B. Disregard minor administrative errors to expedite the admission process, focusing only on substantive eligibility criteria, as long as the errors do not appear to be intentional attempts to mislead. Option C. Initiate a broad review of the entire admission process, suspending all current application processing until a comprehensive overhaul of administrative procedures can be completed, citing general best practices in document management. Option D. Immediately reject all applications exhibiting any form of administrative error to maintain the strictest adherence to initial submission requirements, as per the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam regulations. The correct answer is A. Implement a standardized procedure for requesting missing documentation from affected applicants within a defined timeframe, ensuring all such requests are logged and tracked against the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance the institute's operational efficiency with the integrity of its admission process, as mandated by the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam regulations. The core tension lies in identifying and rectifying potential procedural deviations without compromising fairness or creating undue administrative burden. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any corrective actions are proportionate, evidence-based, and aligned with the spirit and letter of the exam's governing framework. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented review of the admission process against the established AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam guidelines. This entails identifying specific discrepancies, gathering evidence, and proposing corrective measures that are consistent with the regulatory framework. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes adherence to the Institute's own admission rules and procedures, ensuring transparency and fairness for all applicants. It demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and upholds the credibility of the entrance examination. An incorrect approach that involves immediately invalidating applications based on a single, unverified observation fails to adhere to due process and the principle of proportionality. The regulatory framework likely requires evidence of a significant breach before such a drastic measure is taken. Another incorrect approach, which is to overlook minor procedural deviations to expedite the process, risks undermining the integrity of the admission system and could lead to future challenges or accusations of bias. This disregards the importance of consistent application of rules. A third incorrect approach, which is to consult external, non-AKPRIND specific admission best practices without first referencing the institute's own regulations, is problematic because it prioritizes generic advice over the specific legal and procedural requirements governing the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory framework. This involves identifying the specific rules and guidelines applicable to the situation, gathering objective evidence of any deviations, assessing the severity and impact of these deviations, and then formulating a response that is compliant, fair, and proportionate. This process ensures that decisions are defensible and uphold the integrity of the institution and its processes. Question 14. The investigation demonstrates that a candidate for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam, who is a relative of a senior faculty member, has narrowly missed the minimum score required in the mathematics section of the entrance examination, but has otherwise met all other admission criteria. The faculty member has approached the admissions committee advocating for the candidate's admission, citing the candidate's strong performance in other subjects and potential for future success. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the candidate's entire application, including all scores and supporting documents, and present the findings to the admissions committee for a decision based strictly on the published admission criteria. Option B. Recommend the candidate for admission based on their overall strong performance and potential, with a note to the admissions committee regarding the faculty member's recommendation. Option C. Suggest the candidate retake the mathematics section of the entrance exam immediately, even though the official retake period has passed, to meet the minimum requirement. Option D. Expedite the admission process for this candidate, overlooking the slight shortfall in the mathematics score, given the faculty member's influence and the candidate's otherwise good profile. The correct answer is B. Recommend the candidate for admission based on their overall strong performance and potential, with a note to the admissions committee regarding the faculty member's recommendation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need to maintain academic integrity and the pressure to admit a candidate who may not fully meet the established criteria. The AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam regulations, as stipulated for admission, require adherence to specific academic and administrative procedures. The challenge lies in balancing the institute's commitment to fair and transparent admission processes with potential external influences or personal considerations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any decision made is justifiable within the established regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the candidate's application against all published admission requirements, including academic records, entrance examination scores, and any other stipulated criteria. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's regulatory framework for entrance examinations, which prioritizes merit and adherence to established standards. Ethically, it upholds fairness and equal opportunity for all applicants by ensuring that decisions are based on objective criteria rather than subjective influence. An incorrect approach would be to bypass the standard review process and recommend admission based solely on a personal connection or a perceived future potential, without concrete evidence of meeting the minimum requirements. This fails to comply with the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam regulations, which mandate a structured evaluation. Ethically, it undermines the integrity of the admission process, creating an unfair advantage and potentially admitting a candidate who is not academically prepared, which could negatively impact the academic environment. Another incorrect approach would be to selectively apply or ignore certain admission criteria to accommodate the candidate. This violates the principle of consistent application of rules, a cornerstone of regulatory compliance. It also breaches ethical standards by demonstrating a lack of impartiality and potentially setting a precedent for future deviations from established procedures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the facts against the relevant regulations. Professionals must first identify the specific rules and guidelines governing the situation. Then, they should assess the candidate's qualifications objectively based on these rules. If there is any ambiguity or a need for exception, the process should involve seeking clarification from the appropriate authorities within the institute or referring to established protocols for handling such cases. Always prioritizing adherence to the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance, exam regulations, and ethical principles of fairness and transparency. Question 15. The analysis reveals that a candidate for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination has demonstrated exceptional extracurricular achievements, but narrowly missed the minimum score in one of the core academic assessment areas, as stipulated by the Institute's admission regulations. The admissions committee is considering whether to admit this candidate based on their overall profile. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam? Option A. Admitting the candidate by giving significant weight to their extracurricular achievements, overriding the minimum score requirement in the academic assessment area, as this demonstrates well-roundedness. Option B. Rejecting the candidate solely based on their failure to meet the minimum score in the specified academic assessment area, as per the strict interpretation of the entrance exam regulations. Option C. Initiating a review of the candidate's application by consulting the official AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination, guidelines, and admission policies to determine if any provisions exist for exceptional circumstances or alternative assessment pathways that could accommodate their profile. Option D. Allowing the candidate to retake the specific academic assessment area immediately, even though the official regulations do not provide for such an immediate retake opportunity outside of the scheduled examination period. The correct answer is A. Admitting the candidate by giving significant weight to their extracurricular achievements, overriding the minimum score requirement in the academic assessment area, as this demonstrates well-roundedness. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions, ensuring that admission processes are fair, transparent, and adhere strictly to the established regulations of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold the integrity of the entrance examination with the potential for external pressures or misinterpretations of guidelines. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all decisions are grounded in the documented regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's official entrance examination guidelines and admission policies. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core requirement of adhering to the specified regulatory framework. By consulting the official documents, the admissions committee can ensure that any decisions made regarding candidate eligibility or admission criteria are consistent with the established rules, thereby upholding fairness and preventing arbitrary or biased outcomes. This aligns with the ethical principle of procedural justice and the regulatory mandate to follow institutional guidelines. An incorrect approach would be to rely on informal discussions or past practices that are not explicitly codified in the official regulations. This is professionally unacceptable because it introduces ambiguity and the potential for deviation from the established rules. Admissions decisions must be based on documented criteria, not on hearsay or unverified precedents, which can lead to accusations of favoritism or unfairness and violate the spirit of the regulatory framework. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the perceived potential of a candidate over their fulfillment of the explicit admission requirements as outlined in the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance exam regulations. While a candidate's potential is important, the admission process is governed by specific, measurable criteria. Deviating from these criteria based on subjective assessments of potential, without explicit provision in the regulations for such exceptions, undermines the fairness and objectivity of the examination process and contravenes the regulatory framework. A further incorrect approach would be to interpret the regulations in a manner that is overly lenient or restrictive without a clear basis in the official documentation. This can lead to inconsistent application of rules, potentially disadvantaging some candidates while unfairly benefiting others. Professional decision-making in this context requires a commitment to understanding and applying the regulations as written, seeking clarification from the relevant authorities within AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology if any aspect of the guidelines is unclear, rather than making subjective interpretations. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear identification of the governing regulatory framework. This involves locating and thoroughly understanding the official documents pertaining to the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination and admission policies. Any ambiguity should be resolved by consulting the designated administrative or academic bodies responsible for these regulations. Decisions should then be made strictly in accordance with these documented rules, ensuring transparency, fairness, and accountability throughout the admission process. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal a potential discrepancy in the grading of a specific question on the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination, where a candidate's answer, while not perfectly aligned with the intended response, demonstrates a valid alternative interpretation of the question's premise. What is the most appropriate course of action according to the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's Academic Integrity and Examination Guidelines? Option A. Immediately adjust the candidate's score to reflect the perceived error, assuming the original grading was definitive. Option B. Disregard the discrepancy and proceed with the candidate's admission, as the difference is minor and unlikely to affect overall admission status. Option C. Reevaluate the question's difficulty and potentially revise the grading criteria for all candidates who took the exam to ensure consistency. Option D. Initiate a formal review of the question and the candidate's response by the examination committee, consulting the official grading rubric and relevant academic policies to determine if the alternative interpretation warrants credit. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal review of the question and the candidate's response by the examination committee, consulting the official grading rubric and relevant academic policies to determine if the alternative interpretation warrants credit. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a potential conflict between the immediate need to address a perceived academic deficiency and the established procedures for academic integrity and student rights within the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology. The challenge lies in ensuring that any corrective action is fair, transparent, and adheres strictly to the Institute's regulations, thereby upholding the credibility of the entrance examination process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the examination materials and the candidate's submission against the established AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam guidelines. This ensures that any decision is based on objective evidence and aligns with the Institute's commitment to fair assessment. Specifically, the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's academic regulations mandate a systematic process for evaluating examination integrity. This process typically includes verification of question validity, assessment of the candidate's response against the rubric, and consultation with subject matter experts if ambiguity exists. Adhering to these internal regulations is paramount to maintaining the integrity of the entrance examination and ensuring due process for all applicants. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify the candidate based on a subjective interpretation of a potential error without following the established review procedures. This bypasses the Institute's internal quality control mechanisms and could lead to an unfair outcome, potentially violating the principles of natural justice and the specific academic policies of AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology regarding candidate assessment and appeals. Another incorrect approach would be to alter the examination scoring criteria retroactively to accommodate the perceived error. This undermines the standardization and fairness of the entrance examination, as all candidates should be evaluated against the same, predefined criteria. Such an action would violate the principles of transparency and equity enshrined in academic governance. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy and proceed with the candidate's admission without further investigation. This neglects the Institute's responsibility for maintaining the quality and integrity of its entrance examinations. Failure to address potential issues, even minor ones, can erode the credibility of the institution and its admissions process, Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established institutional policies and procedures. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulation or guideline that is potentially being violated or needs clarification. 2. Gathering all relevant evidence objectively. 3. Consulting with the appropriate internal authorities or committees responsible for examination oversight. 4. Following the prescribed steps for review, verification, and decision-making. 5. Documenting all actions and decisions meticulously. This systematic approach ensures fairness, transparency, and compliance with the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's regulatory framework. Question 17. To address the challenge of ensuring compliance with the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam-specific regulatory framework regarding the use of external resources during the examination, which of the following approaches is the most appropriate for an applicant? Option A. Rely solely on informal advice from friends or acquaintances who have previously taken the exam. Option B. Assume that the examination rules are similar to those of other universities or national examination boards. Option C. Consult general online forums and academic advice websites for common exam preparation strategies and rules. Option D. Thoroughly review the official AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam regulations and guidelines to understand the precise rules on resource usage. The correct answer is D. Thoroughly review the official AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam regulations and guidelines to understand the precise rules on resource usage. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's specific entrance examination framework, particularly concerning the application of its regulatory guidelines. The challenge lies in discerning which approach aligns with the exam's stated requirements for academic integrity and adherence to its established procedures. Careful judgment is required to avoid misinterpreting or misapplying these guidelines, which could lead to disqualification. The correct approach involves meticulously reviewing the official AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam regulations and guidelines to identify the precise requirements for handling external resources during the examination. This approach is right because it directly addresses the exam's mandate for adherence to its specific regulatory framework. By consulting the official documentation, the applicant ensures their actions are compliant with the Institute's established rules, thereby upholding academic integrity and demonstrating respect for the examination process. This aligns with the ethical principle of honesty and the regulatory requirement of following prescribed procedures. An incorrect approach that involves consulting general online forums for exam preparation advice is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the specific regulatory framework of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam. This failure is regulatory because it disregards the official guidelines provided by the institution, which are the sole authoritative source for exam conduct. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence and a potential willingness to circumvent established rules, undermining the fairness of the examination. Another incorrect approach, which is to assume that common exam practices from other institutions are applicable, is also professionally unacceptable. This is a regulatory failure, as it ignores the unique jurisdiction of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam and its specific rules. It is an ethical failure because it prioritizes assumptions over verified information, potentially leading to actions that violate the exam's integrity and fairness. A third incorrect approach, which is to only rely on advice from friends who have previously taken the exam, is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a regulatory failure because it substitutes official guidelines with anecdotal evidence, which may be outdated, inaccurate, or not representative of the current exam regulations. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of independent verification and a reliance on potentially unreliable sources, which can compromise the applicant's understanding of and adherence to the exam's rules. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a hierarchical approach to information gathering. First, always prioritize official documentation from the examining body. Second, if clarification is needed, seek direct communication with the examination administration. Third, Only consider secondary sources if they are explicitly endorsed or referenced by the official guidelines, and always cross-reference with the primary source. This systematic approach ensures compliance with specific regulatory frameworks and upholds ethical standards of integrity and diligence. Question 18. The review process indicates that an applicant for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam has a close personal relationship with a member of the admissions committee. The applicant is aware of this relationship. What is the most appropriate course of action for the applicant to ensure the integrity of the admission process? Option A. Proceed with the application as normal, assuming the personal relationship will not influence the admissions committee member's objective evaluation. Option B. Remain silent about the relationship to avoid any potential complications or perceived favoritism. Option C. Proactively disclose the relationship to the admissions committee, seek guidance on the appropriate procedure, and offer to recuse oneself from any part of the decision-making process involving the relative. Option D. Discreetly inform the admissions committee member about the application and subtly inquire about the likelihood of admission based on their position. The correct answer is C. Proactively disclose the relationship to the admissions committee, seek guidance on the appropriate procedure, and offer to recuse oneself from any part of the decision-making process involving the relative. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's admission policies and ethical considerations, rather than just factual recall. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting the spirit of the regulations, not just the letter, and understanding how to navigate potential conflicts of interest or perceived unfairness within the established framework. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the applicant's actions align with the integrity of the admission process. The correct approach involves proactively and transparently disclosing the relationship to the admissions committee, seeking guidance on how to proceed, and offering to recuse oneself from any part of the decision-making process that could be influenced by the personal connection. This demonstrates integrity, adherence to ethical principles of fairness and impartiality, and respect for the established regulatory framework of AKPRIND. By seeking clarification and offering recusal, the applicant upholds the principle that admission decisions should be based solely on merit and suitability, free from undue influence. This aligns with the implicit ethical guidelines of any academic institution that values fairness and transparency in its selection processes. An incorrect approach that involves remaining silent about the relationship is ethically flawed because it constitutes a failure to disclose a potential conflict of interest. This breaches the trust placed in the applicant and undermines the fairness of the admission process, creates an environment where the decision could be perceived as biased, even if no actual bias occurred. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the application without any disclosure and assume the relationship will not influence the decision, is also problematic. While it might seem like a straightforward path, it ignores the potential for unconscious bias and the appearance of impropriety. The regulatory framework, even if not explicitly stating this scenario, implies a commitment to fair and objective evaluation, which this approach jeopardizes. A further incorrect approach, such as attempting to leverage the personal connection to gain an advantage, is a direct violation of ethical principles and likely contravenes the spirit, if not the explicit wording, of AKPRIND admission regulations concerning integrity and fair play. This demonstrates a lack of ethical judgment and a disregard for the principles of merit-based selection. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive assessment of any potential conflicts of interest, however minor they may seem. Transparency and open communication with the relevant authorities, in this case, the admissions committee, are paramount. Seeking guidance and offering to recuse oneself from any potentially compromised decision-making processes are key steps in maintaining professional integrity and upholding the principles of fairness and impartiality inherent in academic admissions. Question 19. What factors determine the validity and fairness of an applicant's submission for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance examination, particularly concerning the accuracy of declared academic qualifications and prior educational background? Option A. The applicant's adherence to the principle of truthful and complete disclosure of all academic qualifications and prior educational experiences as stipulated by AKPRIND admission regulations. Option B. The applicant's perceived social standing or connections within the academic community, which might indirectly influence the review process. Option C. The applicant's ability to present a compelling narrative about their future potential, even if it requires downplaying or omitting certain past academic challenges. Option D. The applicant's willingness to engage in informal discussions with admissions staff to clarify ambiguities in their submitted documents. Correct answer is A. The applicant's adherence to the principle of truthful and complete disclosure of all academic qualifications and prior educational experiences as stipulated by AKPRIND admission regulations. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the core principles governing the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology's entrance examination process, specifically concerning the integrity and fairness of the selection. The applicant must navigate the ethical imperative to present accurate information while also understanding the potential consequences of misrepresentation. Careful judgment is required to balance personal ambition with adherence to established academic and institutional regulations. The correct approach involves a commitment to honesty and transparency regarding academic qualifications and any prior educational experiences. This aligns with the fundamental regulatory framework of any academic institution, including AKPRIND, which mandates truthful disclosure of information for admission. Specifically, the AKPRIND entrance exam guidelines, as per its internal regulations, would emphasize the importance of authenticity in submitted documents and declarations. Adhering to this principle ensures that the selection process is fair and equitable for all applicants, based on genuine merit and qualifications. It upholds the academic integrity of the institution and prevents individuals from gaining an unfair advantage through deception. An incorrect approach that involves fabricating or misrepresenting academic achievements fails to comply with the implicit and explicit regulations of the AKPRIND entrance examination. Such actions constitute academic dishonesty, a serious ethical breach that undermines the credibility of the entire admission process. The institution's regulations would undoubtedly prohibit such behavior, leading to immediate disqualification and potentially further disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach, such as withholding relevant academic information that might be perceived as detrimental, also violates the spirit of transparency expected in an application process. While not outright fabrication, omission can be a form of misrepresentation. The AKPRIND entrance exam framework expects a complete and accurate picture of an applicant's academic history. Failure to provide this can lead to an inaccurate assessment of the applicant's suitability, thereby compromising the fairness of the selection. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough review of the AKPRIND entrance exam's official guidelines and any accompanying ethical codes. Applicants should prioritize honesty and accuracy in all aspects of their application. If there is any doubt about how to present information, or if certain past academic experiences might be sensitive, the most ethical and compliant course of action is to seek clarification directly from the AKPRIND admissions office. This proactive approach ensures that all information provided is accurate and presented in accordance with the institution's requirements, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the application and the applicant's standing. Question 20. Quality control measures reveal that a candidate's submitted essay for the AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam exhibits significant stylistic similarities to published academic work from another institution, raising concerns about potential plagiarism. The examination committee must decide how to proceed. Option A. Immediately disqualify the candidate from the entrance examination based on the initial suspicion of plagiarism to maintain the integrity of the exam. Option B. Temporarily set aside the essay and proceed with evaluating the candidate based on other components of their application, deferring the plagiarism issue indefinitely. Option C. Inform the candidate's previous institution of the suspected plagiarism to seek their input and verification. Option D. Initiate a formal investigation into the suspected plagiarism, gathering evidence and consulting AKPRIND academic integrity policies and relevant Indonesian educational regulations before making any determination on the candidate's eligibility. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal investigation into the suspected plagiarism, gathering evidence and consulting AKPRIND academic integrity policies and relevant Indonesian educational regulations before making any determination on the candidate's eligibility. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between ensuring the integrity of the entrance examination process and the need to address potential irregularities promptly and fairly. The AKPRIND Yogyakarta Institute of Science and Technology entrance exam has specific regulatory frameworks, laws, and guidelines that govern its administration. Adherence to these is paramount to maintain the credibility of the institution and the fairness of the selection process. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented investigation that respects the rights of all candidates while upholding the examination's integrity. This approach prioritizes gathering objective evidence, consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations, and ensuring a transparent process for any candidate accused of misconduct. The justification lies in adhering to principles of due process, fairness, and the specific regulations governing academic admissions at AKPRIND, which likely mandate thorough investigation before any punitive action is taken. This ensures that decisions are evidence-based and defensible. An approach that immediately disqualifies a candidate based on suspicion without a formal investigation fails to uphold the principle of innocent until proven guilty and violates the procedural fairness expected in academic admissions. This could lead to legal challenges and damage the reputation of AKPRIND. Another incorrect approach, which involves publicly disclosing the suspected irregularity before a thorough investigation, breaches candidate confidentiality and could unfairly prejudice other applicants or the reputation of the individuals involved. This also contravenes privacy regulations and ethical guidelines for academic institutions. A third incorrect approach, which involves ignoring the irregularity to avoid potential controversy, directly undermines the quality control measures and the integrity of the entrance examination, potentially admitting unqualified candidates and compromising the academic standards of AKPRIND. This is a failure of professional responsibility and regulatory compliance. Professionals in academic admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the issue, consulting the relevant regulatory framework, AKPRIND-specific guidelines, national education laws if applicable, gathering factual evidence, seeking advice from relevant internal committees or legal counsel, and then proceeding with a fair and documented process. This ensures that actions are compliant, ethical, and defensible.